Hey guys, what's up? So many of you have seen that the USDA decided to update their zone map recently. This is, the growing zones that a lot of gardeners use to help determine what they should be growing in their area. And so today, since there's not just a whole lot to look at in the garden, I thought we'd maybe take a quick look around and then I would talk to you guys about what that means for you and your garden. Draco out here acting like he's on crack. Sometimes cats just do this. Hi, buddy. What? You seeing ghosts? It is also quite windy out here today, which makes it a little difficult to film in a way you guys can understand what I'm saying. So we will quick look around and then go inside. So far, everything probably looks about the same as it did last week. None of the stuff I planted here has come up yet. And because it's been cold out, that's probably not that big of a deal. I thought that might be something, but I don't think it is. Yeah, when it's cold outside, things take a lot longer to germinate, so I'm not super worried. Brussels sprouts are still looking pretty good. Coming along just slowly, and they're still kind of loose like this. But again, those will still be quite edible. They just will have to be cooked a little different than those nice little tight balls. We've got fava beans down here. Looking pretty good. This one's a little floppy. Could be just it's thirsty. It hasn't done a whole lot of raining here. But everything else around it looks mostly fine, so I'm not too worried about it. This broccoli here that I took the head from not too long ago, definitely its little extra florets are past their prime. I should have picked them sooner, but I'll probably go ahead and chop them off today and throw them in something. We've got another broccoli trying to make a head. Never really got that big before it started kind of spreading out, so this one is probably also going to get yoinked. Over here where the Waltham broccolis are, I noticed the other day that this one had a ton of little aphids on it. Oh, you can see they're still all over this plant, but they're actually not on any of the surrounding plants. And I wonder if that means that this one is just particularly sick plant, because aphids do tend to go for the weakest link. And especially if they're infesting one and not all of them, that honestly doesn't worry me too much. Like, I will do what I can to kind of get this out of here, but this plant is probably beyond saving anyway. And since the rest of them look good, I kind of trust that they're all healthy and getting the nutrients that they need. No cauliflower heads just yet, but that looks like the start of something in there to me. And it did get below freezing last night and a couple other nights, so all the little potatoes that had come up in here, they have all died back. And I guess now we will wait to see. There's one of the little ones. We'll wait to see if they come back in the spring, or maybe halfway through the winter, because in South Carolina we have these really warm spells for no particular reason. It makes it kind of hard to grow here because we'll have like fake fall and fake spring before the weather changes back for a little bit, so plants can really easily get confused because there's not a super consistent gradient of temperatures from hot to cold and cold to hot. We are getting really close on the carrots now. I've been pulling them and looking, and I think from here I could start pulling pretty much any time. The rate at which they're going to get bigger is going to slow down a lot, especially since it's much colder out. And then my time period for harvesting them is pretty forgiving, as long as it doesn't actually get warm enough to make them think about starting to bolt. I'm also just about ready to start planting garlic. I spent the whole morning peeling my garlic, getting it ready to plant. And normally I wouldn't recommend peeling your garlic before planting, but in my case I've had a problem with garlic mites, and part of mitigating that problem is peeling all of them before I plant them and looking at the damage, and then soaking them in alcohol to kill off the mites. You can see mite damage, but you can't actually see mites because they're so teeny tiny. So even if you don't see the damage, you could still have mites, although it is a very low possibility. So I always peel at least one or two, and if I'm peeling garlic throughout the year and seeing that there's damage, then I will peel every single clove that I'm going to plant and make sure that it gets soaked. And don't get too worried. Even if your garlic does have this kind of damage, it's still perfectly edible. There's nothing really wrong with it. As far as like just a little bit of damage, I mean, more damage is going to dry out the garlic, and it's going to make it more susceptible to other things like fungal infections and other like things in the soil, because the mites break through the protective skin that the garlic has. But the mites themselves and the damage they cause are not a problem for you if you're just trying to eat the garlic. All right, kitties, ready to go inside? So once this garlic is done soaking, I'll probably soak it in alcohol for like 3 or 4 hours. And then after that, I will soak it in an organic Rev solution so that all of the like good bacteria and microorganisms that would have been on these can get replenished. And I actually kind of like this because killing everything and then replenishing with organic Rev feels like just such incredible insurance that all the right microbes will be here on the garlic, ready to go into the soil and create meaningful connections with these plants and help them get the nutrients that they need as they are growing for next year. Okay, so let's have our chat about USDA growing zones. So, if you don't already know what a growing zone is, what it is the average low temperature for your area based on the previous 30-ish years of data that the USDA has collected. And so this year they have more data, so they are updating the zone map based on that new data. And what you'll find is that a lot of you went up in zone, meaning your number is higher, meaning that the average low expected temperature for your area is higher than it used to be. So what does that mean? That means that plants that are perennial in your area are probably going to increase, like the number of plants that are perennial will increase, because what that low really tells you is it tells you what plants you can like feasibly grow as perennials in your area without them dying to that cold, low temperature. A lot of people get confused that this growing zone is going to tell you what sorts of plants will thrive in their environment. And it really doesn't give you that information. It doesn't tell you if your climate is dry or wet. It doesn't tell you how hot it gets in your climate. It only tells you what the low temperature for the year is going to be. So it tells you whether or not it's going to get cold enough in your area to kill something. I went from zone 7B to zone 8A. That's a 5-degree difference in Fahrenheit of the expected low temperature for my area. And that does give me a little more wiggle room on the sorts of stuff that I can overwinter here, but it doesn't change what I'm doing just a whole lot. If you are looking into what this change means for you, if you went up or maybe even down, I'm not sure if anybody actually went down because I think most of it is warmer, but what you can do is search up your new number, look at what that low temperature means for you, and then look at the sorts of plants that you might be looking at to grow perennially and see if any of them are kind of on that line, and if this increase means that you're likely to be able to grow these things perennially. Now, I will also say that just because it's supposed to be perennial in your zone does not mean that it can't suddenly get too cold and actually kill that plant. Remember, this is a 30-year average of the low expected temperature. And just because it hasn't gotten that cold in 30 years doesn't mean it can't get that cold this year, even very briefly. And especially if you were like kind of on the line there, whereas, this plant may or may not be perennial, you could protect it through days like that. But it is a risk if you're going to grow something that's like barely perennial in your area. Also, before I leave you, I did promise that I would talk about how much popcorn I actually grew this year. I am only partially through with that, but I did want to give you guys a short update. This is what I've got so far, and this is everything that still needs to come off the cobs. This jar is like 4 cobs worth of corn, and this got pulled earlier just because the cobs that I pulled it off of, I also picked earlier, so they were a little drier. Although this stuff is probably just about ready as well. So next week, hopefully, when I've done all of these, I'll show you guys kind of the final amount of popcorn, and maybe I'll even weigh it out for you. Also, shout out to how lovely this honeycomb shelf still looks. My dad and I built this together, and there's a whole video about it over on his channel. It's called Red Truck Woodshop, and that's always linked below. But I've got my little string of hearts going here. Ugh. I have so much joy wrapped up in looking at this shelf. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you next week. Happy gardening!